Today we're visiting with Naim and Tom Binning, longtime members here at Hope United Methodist Church, about their involvement in the church and some of their memories that they've been here for 42 years now. They joined this church in April of 1980 and transferred your membership from St. Andrews. That's correct?
Do you know, we actually never joined at St. Andrews. We both had our membership in our church, small churches in Wyoming. And so we gave a lot of thought to transferring the memberships because we knew that those churches kind of counted on still some of our support up there.
Sure.
So it was, I guess, Hope felt like home that we finally made the decision to transfer our membership.
And
But
you
we-
both were raised in Wyoming?
Yes, southeastern.
What towns?
Burns for her, and Pine Bluffs for me.
Tell me how did you find this church?
Well, we were friends. We had gone to St. Andrews when it was still on University, and our friends Terry and Jeanette Palmer were members here. Jeanette was the organist, and our kids were friends with their kids. So this was closer to home, and the church had just started meeting in the fellowship hall, and so we came and. It was more like our small churches in Wyoming,
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
Well, in 1980, as you mentioned, we were meeting in what's now the Schultz Fellowship Hall,
Yes.
and that was the only building. Tell us what it was like to worship in that one room.
It was a lot bigger than what,
What we were used to.
So was it?
so we liked it, and it was just, I mean, you really felt the sense of community, and yeah, it was good, and we got to know Reverend Schultz and his wife. And
Yes,
it was,
Victor Schultz and his
yes.
wife Ruth were
Yes.
here at that time, as was Al Brown.
Yes.
Tell us some of your memories of Victor and Ruth Schultz.
Well, Tom traveled a lot, and occasionally with his job, and occasionally I had to go. And so childcare was always a concern. And Ruth was kind enough to be willing to come and stay with the kids for 2 or 3 days at a time if I needed to go someplace. And she became Grandma Ruth to our kids, and they have wonderful memories of that. And Victor, because he used to visit, which we really liked, they really were a big part of why we liked it here also.
And your kids called her Grandma, even though she was not kin to
Yeah,
them at all.
No, she was Grandma Ruth.
Yeah. And did Victor come and visit with you?
Yeah, I mean, we were there together when I was in town. He was there, and then I got involved with the finance committee about that time, and that was when we were raising the money and doing the plans and all for the new sanctuary, and which I guess was finished in '84.
84,
or so.
that's right.
And
And the church was growing quite rapidly.
Well, it was.
80 to 84.
It was, and so we had to deal with all of the financial issues that relate to trying to fund a major. I don't remember what the total dollars were, but it was a lot for that little church, and it was done in the proper way because it's worked for a lot of years. They've remodeled it a time or two since then, but the
And
basic footprint was.
You were asked to join a finance because of your financial background?
Well, I was a CPA, and I started out as a CPA with an accounting firm, and then got into the cable television business, and that's when I ended up traveling so much that all over the U.S. So.
Well, tell us what it was like to raise the money for the current sanctuary.
Well, it was it was difficult because the church helps out a little bit. They had some relationships with bond people, and we could do the tax-free bonds and that sort of thing and whatever. But you had to try to do that while you were still running your church.
Right.
And I kind of became known as a hatchet man because I you had to squeeze the pile of wants into the pile of gives, and that was always different. I mean, those two numbers were
Yes.
a long way apart, and so in fact, as I said earlier, I ended up staying affiliated with Finance Committee for a couple years after I was off the committee, because when it got time to squeeze the two funds together, they needed somebody a little more independent than what some of the people on the current committee to try to do that and make it work from a fiscal standpoint, and that's very important.
We were talking earlier, you said that Reverend Al Brown had a difficult time saying no to people.
Well, that's true, and he was a wonderful man and a wonderful preacher, and a good friend, but people came to him with all of their good ideas, and you can't say that they were bad ideas ever. They were all good, and you'd love to be able to do them all, but you can't. I mean, we were a growing church, but we were still growing. We needed to generate the funds to do some of the things that they wanted to do, and during that, you now had bigger operating costs and whatever for the church, and so all of that had to be squeezed in. Those don't wait, so you have to spend that money no matter what.
So you got to be the person that said no to some of these projects or
Yeah.
wish lists.
Yeah.
Name, you remember Al Brown and his preaching style?
I do. It was pretty casual, and I think because I'd grown up in a country church, Pleasant View Methodist, that now is not in operation, but they got in. We had student ministers, but we still had financial obligations to the conference.
Right.
And we had said we had fewer than 20 people there, and they couldn't do that. So they were a Methodist church for a while, but are no longer. But we always had pretty they were Bible-based, but informal sermons and whatever, so,
And because the group was so small,
Yes.
you felt a little
Yeah.
more kinship to everybody.
yes. And so Al was we had come from St. Andrews, where we'd gone before when Russ Brown was the minister there. And we really liked his preaching style also, but Al was even more casual probably, and the congregation was smaller here, so it was very comfortable, yeah.
Well, after Al Brown, Dr. Richard Vickery came. Do you remember him?
Yes.
And what are your memories of him?
Well, one of the things about Dr. Vickery was that he was here to, I think, get things kind of squared away financially with the church and whatever, and administratively. Al Brown didn't like to do that sort of thing so much, and he as I said earlier, didn't like to say no and whatever, and Dr. Vickery maybe didn't like to, but he was willing to, and got things straightened out from that standpoint. But
Funny how I remember Dr. Vickery a little bit, and we didn't ever get to know him well, but liked him from church. But he had a prayer that I think he said every Sunday, and I don't remember all the beginning, but our kids were kind of elementary age probably, and he would always say this prayer, and set your soul on fire. And he would emphasize emphasize that. And our girls, that was one thing they would say occasionally was, and let's set your soul on fire. So he reached us in many ways, and I know he was a good administrator. We didn't know him as well as,
Well, and he was quite a contrast from Al Brown,
Yeah.
because he was
Yes.
much more of a formal person.
Right.
yes, yes.
Follow the rules and do everything instead of just sort of sit and talk with you as a friend. But
Yeah.
you're right, he was very interesting. Well, after Dr. Vickery, Sam Day was the minister here. Do you remember him?
Yes.
Tell me your memories of Sam Day.
I loved his, well, he was just such a nice man, but I loved his sermons that, you kind of came in and looked at the bulletin and saw what 3 things he was going to address,
And you wondered how you were gonna get there.
yeah, what stories were going to get you there. But yeah, he was,
I remember he would have things like a woman at King Soopers, and then a kid drops an ice cream cone, and I went to the football game, and you're thinking, how in the world are we going to make
Exactly.
a sermon out of this?
yeah. We were sad when he left
Yeah.
because we really, well, we liked him all, but he was fun to
And your kids come to Vacation Bible School and Sunday school here?
They came to Sunday school and Bible school and helped, as I got older, a couple of them helped with Sunday school class with younger kids or Bible school. But other than that, they weren't really involved ever with youth group and whatever.
Okay.
Some of it was our family obligations. That was, Sunday was always family time. But when we asked the girls about their memories of Hope, they have very special memories of being here and the kids they met and the influences those kids had on their lives when they would see them at school as they got older. So,
And now your daughters are all married and have their own kids?
yes.
We have 7 grandkids.
All right.
4 of them are here, and 3 of them are in Houston. Try not to go down there in the summer.
Amen. Well, after Sam Day was here, Margaret Hankins was appointed as a senior pastor and a co-pastor with John Lee. Do you remember Margaret Hankins?
Yes.
Tell us what you think or remember about her.
Margaret really was a friend. I started coming to the Wednesday morning Bible study when she was our leader, and that was a good thing for my soul. But just a good person and easy to talk to about any issues that you might have questions about or whatever.
Yes.
Very kind,
Yes.
gentle lady.
This is a wonderful lady.
Yeah, just really easy to visit with, and you could talk anything
Yeah.
with Margaret. Yeah, she was.
Well, we're blessed to still have Jim Hankins
Yes.
come here.
Yes.
It's unusual for a pastor that served at a church to come back and be a minister, but Margaret and Jim were members here prior to her death. But we miss her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And do you remember John Lee, who served with her for a time?
Do remember him, and
I don't remember him all that well.
I didn't know him as well, but because one of the things I've done for the church is send cards to Homebound or whatever, and so 4 or 5 times a year maybe I would send cards to John as after he left here and was on the list and when he had some health problems. And
Yes.
so I thought about him, and occasionally those people will send a card or a letter. So I knew him more, actually, or felt like I had more of a connection with him after he left. But
Yeah.
I remember him, yeah. Yeah.
And you told me earlier that you used to help pick up the registration and identify the visitors,
Yeah.
and then help Victor Schultz. Tell us a little more about
Yeah,
that.
when we first started coming here, and Millie, and I can't remember her last name, was the secretary. and she would call me on the beginning of the week and tell me when she had the registration forms from the Sunday church ready for me to come and pick up, and I would make phone calls to the people who were visitors, or if they came several times, and then I would let Victor know if they made comments and if people wanted him to come and visit, which he loved to do, and maybe questions they had, so he could know, things to be ready for, or to take materials to him or whatever. So, and I
Well-
don't know how many years I did that, but not too many. But
that was when you were brand new at this church.
Yes,
So you got
yeah.
involved pretty quickly.
yeah,
We also had Steve Miller, who was a co-pastor with Margaret Hankins. You remember
Yeah.
Steve?
Remember Steve? Steve helped us a lot with our weddings of our three girls, because they were all kind of interdenominational weddings, and a bit unique. One in the mountain, or two in the mountains, and one in the Catholic Church downtown, and Steve was very involved in all three weddings, and involved with each of the couples.
Good.
So it was a good thing that he was around at that time, because it was very comforting for us to
Well,
have.
he was a very talented person,
Yes.
musically and as an actor, but he also was sort of a free spirit that probably made him a good person for that interchange between the denominations or
Right.
religions.
well, and he was very willing to contribute, but stay within the parameters of what the Catholic or Lutheran church had to offer or required.
Right.
And he was such a caring person, and really kind. And we were sad when he left too, but I know that some of his thing was he maybe
Cared too
cared
much.
too much.
Yes, I think that's
And-
true. He was
yeah.
a very giving person.
Yes, he was.
And that can lead to burnout, emotional
Yeah.
distress.
Yeah,
Right.
but
Absolutely.
we have very fond feelings of him.
Well, you mentioned Russ Brown, that you'd had some interactions with him. He came here as an interim pastor
Yes.
just for one summer, when I think we were waiting for someone to finish up their education or something to come. But he was here. You remember when Russ Brown was here?
Yes, and because we had gone to St. Andrews when he was there, liked Russ a lot.
Yeah.
But I had done some women's group and maybe Bible study things with his wife Joanne while we were at St. Andrews. And so they were, again, kind of friends,
Yeah.
so.
Well, many people liked him and wanted him kind of to continue
Yes,
on.
yes, yes.
That was a good news, bad news story. He
Yes.
was very effective the summer he was with us.
Yes.
And a lot of people, because they responded to that,
Yes,
wanted him
he
to
was very talented.
to stay.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. After Russ Brown was here, Steve Warren was the pastor. You remember Steve?
I don't remember him that
I
much.
remember Steve, and he was definitely a different personality type. I think he wasn't the warm and fuzzy,
Right.
except that my sister had cancer and was dying during the time that Steve was here. And so I kind of had the advantage from my personal standpoint of talking with him a little bit. And he was very supportive of me in that grief journey. And I didn't particularly like his sermons. Sometimes I'd kind of get going on something and then he'd tell a joke or veer off a little bit, and I'd think, wait a minute, I lost something. But I liked him and the way he helped me with,
And that personal connection.
yes,
Yes.
when my sister was sick and
Yeah.
dying, so.
After he was here, Dale Beck came for a year. You remember
Yeah.
Reverend Beck?
And I really liked Reverend Beck also. He was easy to talk to, and because he was from the mountains and a smaller area, I think too, it was a nice connection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, more recently we had Don Bird as the senior pastor. You remember Don?
Yes, yes, and we liked him as well. Yeah, you know, you get attached to each one and kind of what their style is and different things, and then it's hard when they
When they
leave,
change.
and you have
It
to
sure is.
adjust to somebody new who might be just as good, but we would like Don a lot. Yeah.
You remember Claire McNulty Drews? She was here following Don Bird.
Yes, and I really, because of the kind of farm and horse connection
Yes.
and whatever, felt a connection to her and.
Well, and all the sports stuff. And
Yes,
Yes,
with
her boys are-
with
Yeah.
her boys, and one of them's at Wyoming now,
That's right. That's right.
where we both went
both
to
graduated
school.
there.
But I follow her on Facebook, and Pastor Claire will be one of my favorites.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And our current pastor, Lynn Cheek. You know,
Yes.
you know her?
And sadly, because of COVID, I don't feel like I know past Rev Lynn as well. I talked to her a little bit after church when I couldn't get a word in because
Yes.
a lot of people want to
Yeah.
talk to her. And, but I have to say I don't know her as well as I might.
Well, the last 2 years have been tough to
I
know
send
anybody.
Yeah.
cards to homebound or mostly older people and or people that used to come or people that somebody's asked me to send a card to. And Ann Mangelson's son is in the Wyoming State Prison, and he, interestingly, I met him when he visited here one time, and he lived within a couple of miles of my sister, who lived on a farm in southeastern Wyoming. And she didn't know him, but I spoke to him when he said where he was from that day. But Anne, over the years, when her son went to prison, had asked me to send cards to him. And so I've done that, and he writes very meaningful letters, and he
And
has,
he draws
yeah,
stuff on them, and it's
Yeah.
pretty
They're-
involved, but he's
they're
got time.
masterpieces, and talks sometimes about his faith journey. But he had sent a couple of letters asking questions that I wasn't qualified to get into that depth with, and so I've brought those to Rev Lynn, and she has been really good about corresponding with him.
Oh, good.
And I've appreciated that because because of COVID and just not having the face-to-face with a minister where I could come in and say, what do I do? I've appreciated her a lot for taking over those.
And even though you had the initial contact with this man, you may not have had the talents to address
Oh, for
his
sure
needs
I
or
did.
his,
Well,
And,
Yeah.
and she, a couple of times when I've gone through to greet her after church, and she'll ask me if I've heard anything more from him or whatever, so I know that
Yeah.
she's ministered to
it's on
him a lot,
our
yeah.
mind.
Well, you've been here for many years and decades now. Tell me what you like best about this church.
Just, I think that the continuity of it all, because we've been here a long time, we've we've known a lot of different people, and it's comfortable. I don't get here as much for my wife does, but it's still our church.
We have probably since we started coming, and maybe some of it's from coming from a small church, but sat in the back row. And we used to be there with the Hansons and the Parkers and the Odies and the Brutons and different people. And I still sit in the back row, and many of those people are gone. But one of our favorite things talk about, it's really the people from the church. Besides the ministers, it's the connections you make. But when Ann Fort, who everybody loves, came in one time, and I was fortunate enough to have a mother that sort of, she and Ann had some similar. And one time Ann came in and wanted to be in the back row, but because I'm sure she was talking to everybody else that loves her, both ends had filled up, and so she climbed over the back.
This was just not many years ago.
Yeah, I know she was over 80,
Oh,
and
she was way over 80.
and just a couple of years, or a couple of Sundays ago, I came in and there were people at each end, and I usually sit by Roger Bruton because he and Carol were good friends for many years, and I hated to disturb. One lady had a cane or walker, and somebody was at the other end, so I said to Roger, "Do you think I can do what Ann did?" And I luckily had slacks on, so I just climbed over, and Roger was kind. He looked at me and he said, "You did that pretty gracefully." but but it's kind of the back row. Well, I think Roy Jarrett always says the back row, and Beth calls it Sinner's Row or something. But yeah, a lot of good memories.
She calls it Sinners Row?
Amazing.
Well, and Tom, you worked with Dick Hansen and Dick Parker when they're raising the money for the church, and some of those people passed on, and some of them big influence on this church.
Well, Dick Hansen, you know, he was heavily involved, as you know, in every part of the church, and he was kind of the liaison between the administrative board and the finance committee and whatever. And I think that, I mean, I think he was on the finance committee for probably 30 years or whatever, because he felt the importance of that. And then, you know, Jim Perry, Norm Bledsoe.
Warren Culpepper was.
Yeah, Warren Culpepper was in there, and Shirley Hall.
Yeah.
Shirley was in
She's
there.
another one
That we had some, you know, she was good because she could talk to some of the ladies better than I could as far as getting the costs under control.
As I recall, one of the big issues was how big the kitchen was going to be and whether we would have a kitchen or not.
Yeah.
And you needed somebody to kind of to speak the language to that support group that wanted the kitchen.
Yeah.
You know, talking about the Hansons, one of my favorite things, or in old memories too, was when Merlin Bender was here, and Peggy Hansen, who was just one of a kind, and she would come in sometimes in a costume of some kind, and from the back of the church would say, "Merlin!" And he would get up, and it was a great way to make an announcement or drive home a point. And
It always worked.
It did.
very
It always
special
worked.
people. I mean,
It
the
was
church
almost
is
a
the people.
vaudeville act because
Yes.
they were so good about it, but we all loved them so much that we wanted to hear what they had to say. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about a lot of people and memories and involvement in the church. Have we missed anything that you can think of? Your memories here?
No, I don't think so. I think, no, I think
Yeah.
we've done pretty well.
Next month, the church will be 47 years old.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you would like to see from this church in the next 47 years?
Well, as I said earlier, my wish is that it's here 47 years from now. And it means you're gonna have to be fiscally responsible during those years. Because as we know right now, I'm not involved at all in the financial part of the church right now, but I have to believe that it's tough. And, because everything's tough right now. And so it's gonna be a real task for people to deal with keeping it alive.
Yeah. And COVID has had a lot of people just stay home, and they haven't all come back.
That's right.
A few of them have started to come back, and I'm like you, Tom, it's a concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what I hope to see is, and again, this comes from just where we are in society right now. I really like that we're a Bible-based church. The ministers address current things, but it relates back to the Bible, and I feel like that's important. But a lot of different people have a lot of different ideas about how things should be, and I hope the church, because of some of the stuff from the church as a whole, the issues that we're facing, that we can all still be kind and be the special people in each other's lives, and accept that even though we might have different opinions, we still worship the same God and can be kind to each other.
Amen, I can support that. Well, I want to thank you for sitting for this interview. It's been very interesting, and I appreciate your service to this church and helping it be what it is today, and we look forward to it in the future.
Well, and Charlie, thank you for all you do. Your Sunday posts after church are always fun to see, and I haven't read all your books, but just your involvement and support of the church is important too. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Needs to happen, because that's what'll keep it going.
Yep.
Yeah, the church is the people,
Yeah.
That's
like you.